This is the #1 showbiz podcast. It's Talk for Two. Here's your host, Matt Bailey.
Happy New Year, everybody, and a very special Happy New Year to our season sponsors, Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. And we can't forget a very special thank you and Happy New Year to our announcer, Gary Owen. I hope 2016 is treating everybody out there listening as well as it is treating me just 4 days in. It's time to jump in, because if ever Talk for Two had a guest for whom no introduction was needed, it's this gentleman. Among Mr. Ed Asner's achievements are a record 7 Emmys, 3 Golden Globes, and a Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award. He also served 2 terms as president of that very same union. Mr. Asner found fame, or rather maybe fame found him, in the 1970s as Lou Grant, first on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then his own spin-off named after the character. He also had major roles in 2 legendary miniseries, Roots and Rich Man, Poor Man. He is known to a whole new generation of fans as Santa Claus, the Santa Claus to end all Santa Clauses, mind you, in the modern Christmas classic, Elf. And of course, as Carl Fredricksen in the 2009 Academy Award-winning Pixar film Up, an instant classic, if you ask many in my generation. Ed Asner sat down with me to discuss his upcoming appearance at the Metropolitan Room on January 15th and 16th. That is one of my favorite rooms in the city. It will be a brand new one-man show written by his Mary Tyler Moore colleague, Ed Weinberger. We also talk Lou Grant, Carl Fredricksen, and even some politics. Here now to tell us about bringing his prostate to New York, our interview with Ed Asner. Mr. Ed Asner, welcome to Talk for Two. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. Happy New Year. This is going to be a lot of fun, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you excited? You're coming back with a show at the Metropolitan Room. You're coming back to New York. Are you excited to be back in NYC?
Very much so. Very much so, because you live or die by NYC.
Yes, I go to...
And during the 2 shows there, we'll gain some idea of whether we've got a show or not.
Oh, so it'll be the premiere of it.
Not in total. We've done it twice here on the West Coast.
Oh, very nice, very nice. And where will you take it? Where will you take it if it does very, very well in the Metropolitan Room?
Well, it's more like a general appeal. We exhibit it.
Yeah.
To potential producers and see how they're taken by it, and they then propose to us where they think they could display it profitably.
That's wonderful. And we'll get into a little bit about the creation of it in just a few minutes, but I want to cover everything with you here today. This is a very rare treat and honor for my show. And so let's begin. You had done a lot of things before you entered college. I know you were interested in archaeology.
You said you wouldn't talk about it.
That's funny. But you had done a lot of things before entering college, from archaeology to even broadcasting. And you were cast in Murder in the Cathedral, a T.S. Eliot play at the University of Chicago. Is that when you really got bit by the acting bug? Is that when you thought, I want to do this?
That's when I got hooked.
Yeah.
That's when I got hooked. And it's a gorgeous play. And I was a sucker for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also started my first affair with a lady in the chorus.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of clinched my diving into showbiz.
That's wonderful. And you said that acting became, quote, like therapy. All these decades later, all these awards later, is that still true? Is it still a cathartic experience for you?
It's the only thing I find myself occasionally excelling at.
Okay.
And what it does for my ego, nothing else does.
Yes. And
I worked at auto plants, I worked in steel mills, I drove cabs, I sold shoes, I sold TV advertising. I was miserable at all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And now you were in the Army for a time, and then Paul Stills, this was interesting read. Paul Stills asked you to join... Stills, yes. Stills. Asked you to join his theater company when you left the Army. What had he seen of yours how did you come to know him?
Well, we were both in the theater group at the University of Chicago.
Oh, wow.
We had never acted together, but we had seen each other's work, liked it. And, well, this is on the heels of I was sent to Fort Monmouth to learn radar repair.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I went to see the special service officer, and I told him, I'm an actor, and I'd like to get into special services. And he broke out laughing. This is during the Korean War. And he said, "You crazy? We're 50 miles from New York. What the hell do we need you for?" So I said, I understand. And I went back to trying to learn radar repair. Then I was finally sent to France,
mm-hmm.
to a small post in the Anjou Valley.
Yeah.
And like 3 weeks before I was sent home from France in '53, I got a letter from Paul Stills saying, "Hey, we're starting a theater company in Chicago. Come join us, and we'll do classics and new plays, and we'll have fun." And my life fell into place.
That's wonderful. Now, do you remember, I always like to know about the first things that our guests have. Do you remember your first television spot? And did it come about with your work with Paul Stills?
I think while I was still in Chicago, still working at theater,
mm-hmm.
That Paul had created, I did an extra in a Dennis O'Keefe movie.
Wow.
That was to advance getting my Screen Actors Guild card. So I did that, and I vowed I'd never do an extra again. I did, but nothing as arduous as the one I had to do in the Dennis O'Keefe movie.
Yeah. And
then I also did, Tom Earhart was a wonderful actor who was at our theater. And we did the Lincoln-Douglas debates together. I played Douglas, of course.
Yes, of course.
And he was very much Lincoln-esque. So it was a fairly effective duo. And I think that may have contributed to my first SAG card.
That's incredible. And of course, after a lot of the guest work and stuff, you became Lou Grant on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, a character you played across 2 television series, won you numerous Emmys, I think 5 out of your 7. If my numbers are correct, and sometimes they're not, but that first reading a lot about your audition, it was a rather interesting reading, wasn't it? The first reading for Mary.
Yeah, I read the script and I loved the script.
Yeah,
and I went in. I hadn't done that much comedy, almost none in television, so I went in to read and. I finished the reading, and Jim Brooks, one of the 2 producers, said, "Well, that was a very intelligent reading," which automatically meant that he was sure as hell wasn't funny. So he said, "When we have you back to read with Mary," and I said, "Well, that sounds promising.
Wonderful.
We want you to read it this way, crazy, wild, wiggy, uncontrolled." And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah.
So I said, tell you what, why don't you have me try to read it that way now? And if I don't do it, don't have me back. I've never talked like that before or since.
Yeah. Wow. It's
So
really
they said, well, we do have another appointment, but go ahead, try it.
yeah.
So I tried it, and they laughed. They said, read it just like that when you come back with Mary.
Oh wow. That's awesome. And so, of course, you got the gig, and like I said, across 2 shows. And I'm curious because I've heard you tell that story about the first reading being very intelligent. When did you know that you had gotten the comedy and the pacing and the timing of the material down, and were you had that comedy now in your bones and had the character?
Well, I kept slugging away. Had these expert producer writers judging my work, and Jay Sanders was the usual director.
Mm-hmm.
He was busy lashing me constantly, so that it was always a work in progress. Not until a couple of years had gone by could we really safely sit back and say without doubt this was the way to play this.
Mm-hmm.
A very good example to compare.
Please.
Maybe a couple of years into the show, Ted was in a scene, and he asked Gavin and me to watch it. And we watched it, and we laughed our asses off. And then he said, now, when I do it again, I'm going to try it a different way. So, we were always felt lucky to get it one way. Here he was trying it a second way.
Mm-hmm.
So he did it again, and it was just as funny, wonderful. And we told him, I said, well, now I'm going to try it next time this way, a third way. And we thought, good God Almighty. And he did it, and it was funny. And then finally, when he decided what to settle on, he settled most of the first way that he had done it,
Mm-hmm.
with little modifications.
Yeah.
And we just sat, Gavin and I, and marveled that somebody was that gifted they could approach it in 3 different ways and get laughs.
Wow, that's just incredible.
We would never dream of doing it.
Yeah, but you had to do your own modification with the same character. And again, the fan in me wants to know, the fan of both these shows wants to know, what did you have to do as an actor to take Lou Grant after working so hard at that comedy, and then you got the hour show entitled Lou Grant, and you had to turn it into a dramatic character. You had to play the same character, but entirely different genre of material. How hard was that to switch that over? Was that?
It was very hard. Nobody had done an hour series. The producers, the writers, most of the crew, none of the actors. Nobody had done an hour series.
Mm-hmm.
We were going from audience laughter, a half hour with 3 cameras catching the acting where they could, to a single camera, no audience reaction, call it a dramedy.
Yeah.
And everybody with the producers and Jay, the director, were saying, now you're the only one that's going to be there who can keep carrying the banner of Mary Tyler Moore and what it stood for and who it is and who you are and blah, 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 blah. And you've got to, it's all on your shoulders.
Wow.
I said, yeah, boss. And I go in and I always have to remember who to be with Lou, even though nobody's going to laugh at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The best I can get is smiles. Because there wasn't supposed to be an audience watching.
Yes.
In the hour show.
Yeah. And you talk about... go ahead. I'm sorry.
I always use my 2 brothers as my inspiration for the comedic Lou.
Yes.
And as I did more and more of the hour show, I said, this isn't working. I can't do it that way. I can't keep doing the comedic Lou on an hour show. And I've got to pay these scripts they're just due. I've got to investigate them more and do more. So I went more into myself, and I came up with another Lou.
Wow. And who was the inspiration for the dramatic Lou?
My gut.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's really well, and I got to point this out. I know you know it because you have the Emmys, but for our listeners, you are the only male actor, to have won the Outstanding Lead Actor for the same character across both the dramatic and comedic categories, and I think that's just an incredible and outstanding achievement. So whatever you did, followed your gut. It was really, really well. And it obviously worked because of those Emmys. And again, it's just one notch on the belt of a legendary career. And speaking of your career, I want to shift gears. I want to keep this as light as possible, but you can't talk about your career without talking about another important part of it. And that is your political activism. Now, one thing stood out to me because I love the television from the era that you were on, with Mary Tyler Moore and Jay Sandrich. We've had Jay Johnson on, who was on Soap, so I know Jay Sandrich from Soap. One thing about the television shows of that era is they were very politically charged themselves. It was one of the times that television was the most politically charged, but individual people who spoke out, like yourselves, were the ones who got in more trouble than the television shows. Why do you think that was? Do you see that disconnect there, or am I misreading it? Because it seems like television was being more progressive, but there was still an aversion to actors having political views.
Yeah, I would say that I, as an actor, went farther than the political outreach of the Lou Grant show.
Mm-hmm.
We did do one show about death squads in Central America, and it was a very good show, and it worked well. But I'm sure where necessary, we fictionalized the country where it was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
I did not fictionalize when I spoke out personally.
Right.
So it disturbed CBS, disturbed Bill Paley, the owner of CBS.
Yeah.
And and in all fairness, I mean, they're businessmen. You have to regard producers and networks as business people. I don't care how much public service they do. I don't care how much news they present. In the end, they're running a business.
Yes.
When something on their program, such as the Smothers Brothers, or such as Edward R. Murrow at one point,
mm-hmm.
bugged Paley, go too far in talking about things they think the public doesn't want to hear about.
Yeah.
Or 50% of the public doesn't want to hear about it. Then they slap them down, and they slapped me down by canceling Lou Grant.
Mm. Yeah. And, but I still, like I said, and I think it's an important part of who you are as a person, who you are, and how you use your celebrity. So I just wanted to get that one question in there. And I'm going to switch gears completely, fast forward. We got to talk about it. We have to talk about this brand new show. We haven't even said the name of it because I want to let you say it. It's hysterical, just the title of it. So go ahead. What's the show you're doing at the Metropolitan Room?
Well, the one-man show I'm doing at the Metropolitan is called A Man and His Prostate.
It cracks me up. And it's written by.
You call it the male response to the vagina monologue.
Yes. It's great. And it's written by Ed Weinberger, who you worked with him, and I assume he was part of MTM Productions there. You worked with him on Mary Tyler Moore, I would assume?
He was a producer-writer on Mary Tyler Moore. He had a successful career before that. He had worked with Johnny Carson. He went on to do Taxi and George C. Scott show, Mr. President, I think.
Yeah.
And more than that, I can't recall his credits. They are numerous, but he's had quite a career.
That's wonderful. Now, what can audiences expect? You talked earlier that this is the kind of the East Coast debut. What will audiences expect from such a uniquely titled show? It's one-man show. What are you going to talk about besides the prostate?
Well, I hope I hope it's kind of a double sword.
Yes.
That it's funny for them and at the same time informative.
Yeah. Yes. Now, you previously played FDR in a one-man show, and
Yeah.
I got to ask, is there something about the format that you're drawn to for getting on stage in this way?
In a one-man show?
Yeah. What drew you to doing a one-man show?
We tend to resort to this when nobody's offering us a two-man show.
Yes. But it's incredible the amount of things from television to film to these one-man shows. I got to talk about, they will not let me let you go. We'll spend the last couple of minutes here talking about this because I have a ton of questions. The recent works that my generation knows you from, which is Up and Elf. And let's start with Elf because that was in 2003. Up is more recent. You played Santa, and you've said that it's one of the best Christmas movie that's available. Now, I got to ask, what drew you to the role of Santa, and have you always wanted to play, a fantastical character?
He's not saintly. He's like a regular guy driving a team of horses.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I love about your portrayal.
And he squared, he's on the square, on the level with our master elf, and saying, "I need your help, buddy." And you got to do this, you got to do that, and it finally captivates and inspires people to sing and create power that will generate motor on my sled.
Yes.
And I think it's a good, tangible way to view Santa Claus.
It really is. Was it the writing of it that drew you to the role? I'm curious. What appealed to you.
I'm a sleepy time village most of the time. I'm offered a job. I say, yeah, I'll do it. And yeah, sure. And I get involved and I start doing it. And halfway through, I realize, certain subtleties that I had to be responsible for that I hadn't realized initially. But I think it's a very cleverly written role. And if it hadn't been for Will Ferrell, I couldn't have been as good as I was.
How so?
Because he's so damn good. He was so invested in his interpretation that he forced me to be as invested in mine.
Oh, that's wow. Now we got to move on to Up. I'm telling you, I have people that would kill me if I didn't ask about Up and your role as Carl. They want to know about the switch from live action to animation, but the truth is, you do a lot of voiceover work.
I did certainly before I got Up.
Yes.
Animation's fallen off for me. I don't know why, but it's something I enjoy doing a great deal.
Yes.
I feel, I use the word invested. I feel as invested in doing a voiceover as I do a live performance.
Wow. Yeah. And now with Up, it kind of became, it's a Pixar film. It became an instant classic. What do you make of it? I mean, what do you make of it when people bring this film up now of all the works that you have? Does it warm your heart to know you're a part of something that is now part of a legacy with Disney?
Well, it took me a while. I don't go crazy over watching my work. It takes me a few times before I begin to credit myself with some subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me about 3 times seeing the movie before I began to enjoy what I was doing.
Yeah.
And to begin to realize what a lovely piece of work it is. Not me, but the movie itself. I call it a double love story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is.
It is.
People can't get over the fact that 10 minutes into it, they're crying over the death of Carl's wife.
Yeah.
And from that, we go into a grumpy old man who fights City Hall and tries to get rid of the kid, and the kid won't go away. And he ends up loving the kid.
Yeah.
And becoming the father that the kid lacks.
Yes, it's beautiful. It puts 20-somethings go to tears. I was talking with some friends before I was interviewing you today, and they said every time I watch it, I tear up. So that pretty much. I have two last questions here for you. We have a lot of performers that listen, and I got to ask because I was watching something or reading something, and you said you knew when you started that you had to find work that wasn't, the striking, tall, leading man type. What do you say to actors that want to get in the business and have that same sort of, they're worried that they don't fit sort of that classic, tall, leading man role? What do you say to them?
Character work is some of the most interesting work in the world. You're not tall and a so-called handsome type. Being a character, being the second guy through the door, the third guy through the door, has wonderful wrinkles in it that the leading man can't indulge in necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful to be a zany in the background and get your rocks off.
Yeah. Yes. And one last thing before we say goodbye. It is January 2nd when we're recording this. This will air later on in the week. What are your New Year's resolutions?
To do the best work I've ever done.
That's an incredible resolution, and I'm sure we will be seeing it with A Man and His Prostate, Metropolitan Room, January 15th and 16th. Thank you so much, Mr. Ed Asner.
You've been a delight to be with, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asner. I will see you in New York on the 16th. For everybody else, visit metropolitanroom.com and claim your tickets for this limited engagement before they are gone, and they will go. Ed Asner is such a legend. I can't wait for the 16th to get to come in and see it. And Mr. Asner, I wish you safe travels, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in New York. Everybody else, you can also click the link below to go to our brand new Amazon guest shop and see some of my favorite projects from Ed Asner. You'll also find books, movies, and more from some of our other celebrity guests, all in their own category. I'll be working on getting as many former guests on there in the days and weeks ahead, so check back often. That's it for us this week. Thank you again to our season sponsors, Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. Our regular season returns February 1st. In the meantime, stay tuned to talkfor2.com as well as Twitter and on Facebook for more surprises. Reach out by emailing talkfor2cast@gmail.com and talk about us on social media using hashtag talkfor2. You can backslash that on Facebook and @that on Twitter. Signing off for Talk for Two, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding everyone out there to keep talking for two.
You can hear more show business interviews with the stars at talkfor2.com, where you'll also find one-of-a-kind products to improve your own show. That's talk, the number 4, TWO.com.